We're recording now, so I think we have to get down to business.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to Autism After 18, a podcast presented by Spectrum Connections, an instruction services resource for autistic adults. I'm Tristan Radke.
And I'm Louise Getz.
This podcast is for autistic individuals and their families who are navigating the tricky terrain of adulthood.
Today we're talking about some strategies being used to help autistic youth navigate the gap in services when they become adults. Services that help them continue building their social abilities and services that help them through the job search process. We'll also touch on ways in which some of the technologies used by businesses can make it harder for autistic job seekers to both get and keep a job. Our guest today is John Merges. John is a licensed social worker who has counseled autistic youth and their families for 30 years. John provides clinical therapy services and runs community-based social enjoyment groups for autistic youth. He also helps young adults find jobs where they can be successful in the long term.
John, part of your work focuses on helping young autistic adults develop their social interaction skills through organized community groups. How do these groups work?
Well, the groups are based on young people working together on games and fun activities. The idea is to get a lot of practice. People join our groups and many of them stay with us for years. And they continue to practice things like compromising, decision-making, which game we're going to play, what we're going to do first. If you play my game, I'll play your game. Just having fun together. The other thing is that in the groups, there's usually 3 different things going on at the same time. And that's deliberate so that there's background noise and things that could be distracting. And people get used to that. And so that's a key element of the groups.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think social enjoyment groups are a good way to help autistic youth build their social and relationship skills?
Well, I see social enjoyment as a skill. And since it's a skill, the more practice we get, the better we can get at it. We provide a lot of practice. And we use that practice as a place for people to gain what I call ease and confidence in their ability to navigate a social situation. What I tell young people, even as young as 14, is that we're getting ready for work. There's always going to be social interaction. There's going to be lunch, there's going to be breaks, there's going to be birthday parties, there's going to be retirement parties. We have to develop, if not the ability to enjoy that situation, at least be able to tolerate it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that makes my social enjoyment groups different than any other social skills group is that they are open-ended groups. Every other organization does a closed end. They start with like 11 people on a date and they do 10, 12 sessions and they end with those 11 people. What we do is you start and you stay in as long as you want. Mm-hmm. And when we bring new people in, we bring them in one at a time. And that allows us to build a very, very safe culture. The young people know each other. They look forward to coming to the group. They know who's going to be there. They know the staff is going to be there. I think that's a very, very important part of our groups is that the format is open-ended, like other groups like AA is an open-ended.
Didn't you write a book about it?
Yes, I did. I wrote a book because I thought I wanted to give away. I wanted people to do these groups all over the world. And I thought if I wrote a book and just told everybody, this is how you do it, here it is, that the groups might pop up all over the world. Mm-hmm. And they haven't. And very few books have been sold.
And what's the title, John?
Oh, I usually have to look because it's so long. I think it's called Social Enjoyment Groups for... Hang on.
He needs to look up the name of his own book.
I didn't get to choose the title. Social Enjoyment Groups for Children, Teens, and Young Adults with Autism Spectrum Disorders.
Perfect.
It is still in print, but it's hard to get. It's Jessica Kingsley, publisher. And when they send me their catalog of stuff, it's never mentioned. But I know there are still copies. There's still the first edition in the warehouses.
Well, good.
Someday I hope to hear from, Perth, Australia or something that they're doing the group.
Mm-hmm.
You also work with autistic youth who are looking for their first job. Job interviews can be tricky for autistic adults. So, what kind of challenges are you seeing for adults as they go through the interview process?
One of the techniques that we use is actually to skip the interview process
Oh,
because it is so difficult. With some of the youth I work with, I think it's important for them to discover that they can work. As you may know, Tristan, we work with an employer in Minnetonka who, if he has an opening and I have a young person, I can virtually just tell the person, Chuck's going to hire you. And we can go over there and virtually skip the interview process, get them working for 6, 7, 8 months, learn and have them develop the confidence that they can go in every day and follow directions. They can get up, they can be on time. They can handle the work situation. And so for a lot of the youths that I work with, we deal with interviewing after we've actually found a job and they understand that they can do a job.
What a great idea.
yeah. I have some personal experience with that,
Yes.
with John specifically.
Good.
I know who Chuck is.
Yeah. Well, does that seem to make sense to you, Tristan? That
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
helpful to know that you can actually work so that when you're interviewing, you can say, yeah, I'm confident I can do this.
Yeah.
This is something that I can do. But then to answer your question, looking for a second or a third job, yeah, that's difficult. We do a lot of role playing of interviews, and there's a lot of things you can watch on the internet to do that kind of practice. But it's difficult. It's difficult for all of us. But like I said, what I find is that the young people that I work with develop greater confidence in the interview situation once they know that they have been able to work.
I'm wondering, how do you help them figure out how to mask some of their autistic behaviors without totally pretending to be someone they're not?
Well, we talk about what the situation is like, and we talk about eye contact. And so, for example, if somebody is having a lot of difficulty with eye contact, then we actually practice pretty early in the interview, letting the person know that I'm a person who has difficulty with eye contact. You're going to notice I'm looking down when I'm answering the questions. I don't necessarily ask them to identify themselves as autistic, but just a person who has difficulty making eye contact. So in the practice interviewing, we're trying to identify what might come up that might be difficult. And one of the things, and Tristan, you might have some experience with this. One of the things my clients have real difficulty with is hypotheticals. If somebody says, "What would you do if?" or "What would you do in this situation?"
Yeah.
Most of my clients will tell me, "Well, I'll have to wait till I'm in the situation," which may not be the best answer, but I do understand their
Yeah,
point.
probably not.
As an example of, well, it's not quite a hypothetical, but I have the young man, but he was being interviewed for another job and there were 3 candidates and he was in the final interview and the person asked him, "Why do you think you'd be the best candidate for this job?"
Oh.
And my young man answered, "I wouldn't know because I haven't met the other people."
Yeah.
And
It's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, but it's such a it's a perfect example of how sometimes things can be taken so literally. So that's a question that I actually now will practice. In case you hear this question, let's practice an answer for this one.
That's a rational response. I like it.
Yes, I mean, if you think about it, it was a great response. Probably not what they were wanting, though.
This podcast is brought to you by Spectrum Connections, providing skill instruction and mentoring services to autistic adults. You can learn about our services by checking our website at spectrum-connections.org.
Employers are increasingly using technology to manage their hiring procedures. For example, many job applications are now done entirely online. Have you worked with job seekers who've applied online? Are online applications helpful or not for autistic job seekers?
I have found that online applications, I found this out because I've helped a number of people do online applications in my office, and I find them confusing. They tend to vary so much, and a lot of them tend to ask the same question over and over again, which can frustrate my clients. The number one advice I give is don't do this online application alone. Have me with you, have one of the group leaders with you, if you're comfortable asking a parent.
Yeah.
Don't do it alone, because what I've noticed is one of the most frustrating things is that when you think you're finished and you press the whatever it is to send it off and it says you didn't complete this section, that can be very frustrating. It's very frustrating for me. So online applications, I encourage people to do it with a friend, with a parent, with me, with one of our group leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, probably the most troublesome thing about online applications is that once you send it off, the reply comes through email. And I have a lot of clients who just don't like to check their email. I'm not sure if that's a characteristic of autistic persons or whether or not it's just a characteristic of my clients. And so I often have to get a parent or get me or get somebody else to ask them once or twice a day, have you checked your email?
Right.
Yeah.
Don't quite understand it.
Well, me personally, I probably over check my email, so it's probably not everybody who's autistic,
Yeah.
but like sometimes I'll just be minding my own business and then like, oh, so did I get any email? And then check, and sometimes no, sometimes a lot of times it's junk, but
Yeah.
it's
Well, can I ask you a question then, Tristan?
what.
A lot of my clients have difficulty because the places that they work communicate with them through email and tell them things like, okay, you can apply for a health plan, but you do it online. And they don't read that email correctly, or they don't read it at all. And so then suddenly we realize they don't have health care, or asking for a day off or some vacation is done through sending emails or going to a website. And so I've had people get very confused about that type of thing. Is that when your experience that everything is handled online?
A little bit. At my previous place of employment, they might have had a separate work email that they probably sent a lot of that stuff to that I didn't always know how to have access to, since I didn't even really use a computer at work and it wasn't my regular at-home email address. So as for the health insurance thing, at some point it was taken in to fill out some stuff to renew or refresh or whatever the health insurance.
Yeah, so I have learned with my clients to begin asking that question. Have you signed up for a health plan? Do you know if you're covered? If you're not, this is how it happens. And actually with a young man, I just discovered something else, is he changed jobs. And after 6 months at the new job, he discovered he had 2 health plans and was being charged. He never formally canceled his previous health plan.
Oh, shoot.
And so that's another thing that I try to make a mental note now when people change jobs. I say, oh, make sure that you've canceled your health and dental.
More and more jobs in the current market put a premium on performing tasks very quickly. I'm thinking about picker jobs at Amazon or truck loading jobs at FedEx. At Amazon, for example, pickers have to meet a quota of picking 315 items an hour, 5 items a minute. Those jobs are easy to get because applicants often don't go to interviews through a formal interview process. John, have you worked with someone who got a job like that? And how did they do in that kind of work environment?
I have never had a client apply at Amazon because of what you just said. The knowledge of the pace at which you must work is out there. You can read about that online, and a lot of my clients read online and they say, absolutely not. I'm not working at Amazon.
Right.
I've had mixed results at FedEx and UPS. I have a feeling that it's even more hectic now. 2 or 3 years ago, I had people that were working in the night loading job at FedEx, and a couple of them really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I had one young man who signed on as a helper during the Christmas season for UPS. And that was absolutely wonderful. And I remember that now, because what happened is that the driver would come and pick him up. And then the driver would tell him everything that he needed to do. And then the driver would drop him off. And it was one of the most enjoyable employment experiences a young man has ever had.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to remember that if I ever get somebody who needs just seasonal employment.
Sure.
I actually once worked at FedEx doing that same job that you mentioned, and wasn't there very long. It didn't work out. There were a few times they would send me home after like 5 minutes. At that point, it didn't always feel worth it, like it was worth it to go in.
Sure, absolutely. Many job seekers wrestle with the question of whether or not to disclose their autism diagnosis during the job search. So what are your ideas about how they can make those decisions? And when is it best for them to disclose? During the interview or after they get the job?
You had given me the heads up that this question was coming, and I realized I actually didn't have an answer. So I contacted some of the young people that I know that are working. Mm-hmm. And I said, what did you do about this? And their answer was that they, in the interview process, like I said, if they were going to be something, it was going to be difficult for them to make eye contact, they would disclose that. Mm-hmm. According to the mini survey that I did, they told me that until they were actually talking to the person who was going to supervise them, so in other words, not with HR, but when they were meeting with the person who was going to be an actual supervisor, mm-hmm. that's when they would disclose that they had autism. They felt that would be important and also safe. Not a really big survey, but that's the best I can do on that based on talking to a few of my clients.
Well, that's kind of the middle road, isn't it? That's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice solution.
John, your insights have been really helpful. We'd like to keep going, but that's all the time we have for our podcast today. We want to thank you for the time to share your expertise with us, and thanks to our audience for listening to our conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking me. Good luck. I will create a link to these podcasts on my website as soon as you guys send me one.
This podcast is brought to you by Spectrum Connections, providing skill instruction and mentoring services to autistic adults. You can learn about our services by checking our website at spectrum-connections.org.